Disclaimer: this is a fictional dramatization created for artistic, emotional, and educational storytelling purposes. All characters and events are entirely fictional and created using AI tools. No impersonation, misrepresentation, or harm is intended. The content contains scenes of danger involving child characters. However, no real persons or minors were involved in its production. Grace's Love Stories produces scripted, AI-generated stories that promote, entertain, inspire kindness, and emotional connection. We respect our viewers and strictly adhere to YouTube's policies.
The scent of sage and juniper burned my nostrils as Elder Mara waved the smoldering bundle around my head. Smoke clung to my pale blonde hair, weaving through the strands like ghostly fingers. I kept my eyes downcast, focusing on the ancient stone beneath my bare feet, rather than the dozens of pack members encircling us in the sacred clearing. The full moon hung above us, impossibly large and luminous, casting silver light that made the ceremonial markings on my skin shimmer with an otherworldly glow. "Breathe deeply, Clara," Elder Mara instructed, her voice a weathered whisper that nonetheless carried across the hushed gathering. "Let the spirits of our ancestors guide your heart." I nodded obediently while my insides twisted with guilt. The weight of my grandmother's silver pendant pressed against my chest beneath my ceremonial white dress, its familiar shape a reminder of her last words to me. "Follow your heart, little one, even when the path seems impossible." The pendant had been her most treasured possession, passed down through generations of women in our family. Women who had been chosen, respected, powerful. Women unlike me. The Luna ceremony happened once every decade, when the Alpha King selected a mate from among the eligible Omegas. Being chosen meant power, protection, and prestige. It meant no more sidelong glances of pity, no more whispers about the poor, fragile thing whose parents had died defending our borders when I was just 8. Being chosen meant everything in our world. And I was about to deliberately fail. Elder Mara stepped back, her ancient eyes revealing nothing of her thoughts. The drums began, a primal rhythm that vibrated through the earth and into my bones. One by one, the other candidates stepped forward into the ceremonial circle, 12 young women with perfect posture and practiced smiles, each hoping to catch the eye of King Nathaniel Blackthorn. I had known them all my life. Olivia with her confident stride and strategic mind, Sophia who could track prey for days without rest, Rebecca whose healing abilities had saved countless lives. Each possessed qualities worthy of standing beside the king. Each wanted desperately what I was planning to throw away. And then there was me, Clara Winters, the quiet one, the observer, the girl who spent more time in the library than the training grounds, the unlikely candidate everyone assumed had been included out of tradition rather than merit. The ceremonial circle cleared as the king himself approached. Even from a distance, his presence was overwhelming, tall and broad-shouldered, with an aura of absolute authority that made even the strongest alphas in our pack lower their eyes in deference. His dark hair was swept back from a face that seemed carved from stone, all sharp angles and unyielding planes. But it was his eyes that haunted my dreams. Piercing amber that seemed to see through every defense, every lie. I had avoided direct contact with him my entire life, slipping into shadows whenever he passed, volunteering for duties that would keep me far from the pack house where he resided. Now, as he approached with the measured stride of a predator, I forced myself to maintain my breathing. Steady, controlled, hidden. The candidates formed a semicircle, each performing the traditional greeting, right fist over heart, head bowed in perfect submission. I mimicked their movements, though my heart thundered so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. The ceremonial wine was passed, each candidate taking a careful sip from the ornate silver chalice before passing it along. When the chalice reached my hands, I allowed my fingers to tremble just enough that when I raised it to my lips, a drop spilled onto my white dress. A small red stain spreading like a wound against the pristine fabric. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Spilling the ceremonial wine was considered a terrible omen. "I'm sorry," I whispered, eyes wide with feigned distress. "I didn't mean—" "Continue." King Nathaniel's voice cut through the murmurs, deep and commanding. His expression remained unreadable as he gestured for me to drink. I took the smallest sip possible before quickly passing the chalice to Rebecca beside me, avoiding her pitying glance. The next phase of the ceremony began, the dance. One by one, each candidate would approach the king, performing the ancient steps that had been passed down through generations. The dance was meant to demonstrate grace, strength, and submission all at once, qualities deemed essential for the future Luna. I had practiced for months, perfecting the complex footwork and fluid movements, not because I wanted to succeed, but because I needed my failure to appear genuine. A deliberate failure would raise questions I couldn't afford to answer. As my turn approached, I felt a strange sensation, the weight of someone's stare. I glanced up briefly and found King Nathaniel's amber eyes fixed directly on me, his expression thoughtful, assessing. Something in that gaze made my breath catch, as though he was seeing past my carefully constructed facade, straight into the truth I was hiding. I quickly looked away, focusing instead on the ground, on my breathing, on anything but that penetrating stare. When my name was called, I stepped forward on legs that genuinely trembled now. The drums shifted tempo, and I began the familiar steps. 1, 2, 3, turn. My body moved through the choreography while my mind raced ahead to the moment I had planned for weeks. 3 steps from the end of the dance, there was a particularly challenging spin that required perfect balance. I had mastered it in practice, could perform it flawlessly, even half asleep. It was here that I allowed my ankle to turn, sending me sprawling ungracefully to the ground. The music halted abruptly. The silence that followed was deafening. "I'm sorry," I said again, my voice small and mortified as several hands reached to help me up. I kept my eyes downcast, not daring to look at the king's reaction. I practiced. I swear it. Elder Mara's voice was gentle but firm. "Perhaps it's not meant to be, child." Relief flooded through me, though I was careful to let my shoulders slump in apparent disappointment. No one would question an Omega who simply wasn't good enough. My plan had worked perfectly, or so I thought. "The ceremony continues," King Nathaniel announced, his tone revealing nothing of his thoughts. "All candidates will proceed to the final trial." My head snapped up in surprise, only to find his gaze still fixed on me, something dangerous flickering in those amber depths. My carefully orchestrated plan began to unravel as a cold realization washed over me. He suspected something. The final trial was the most intimate part of the ceremony. Each candidate would kneel before the king while he scented them, seeking the one whose essence called to his wolf. It was said that true mates would recognize each other in this moment, their souls resonating on a primal level that transcended conscious choice. It was also the one part of the ceremony I couldn't control. We formed a line, approaching the throne one by one. I stood at the very end, heart pounding so violently I felt lightheaded. My grandmother's pendant seemed to burn against my skin, a reminder of her belief in following one's heart. But what did it mean when following your heart meant rejecting everything your society valued? I watched as each candidate approached, knelt gracefully, and tilted their head to expose their neck in the ultimate display of trust and submission. The king would lean forward, inhaling deeply, before nodding respectfully and moving on to the next. Some candidates emerged with tears of disappointment, others with carefully masked expressions of relief. None had sparked the recognition that would mark them as his chosen. And then, it was my turn. My legs carried me forward mechanically. Though everything in me screamed to run, I knelt before him, the stone floor cold against my knees. For a moment, I allowed myself to truly look at him, to take in the power evident in his broad shoulders, the intelligence in his gaze, the slight scar that ran along his jaw, evidence of battles fought and won. "Clara Winters," he said, my name in his mouth sounding like something precious and rare. I tilted my head, exposing my neck, closing my eyes as I felt him lean closer. His scent enveloped me, pine forests after rain, wood smoke, something wild and untamed that made my pulse leap. I felt the heat of him near my skin, heard his deep inhalation, felt the slight brush of his nose along my neck that sent shivers cascading down my spine. Then, silence. I opened my eyes, to find him staring at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Surprise, confusion, something darker that made my stomach tighten with instinctive fear. "Stand," he commanded softly. I rose on unsteady legs, keenly aware of the hundreds of eyes watching us. the collective breath of the pack held in anticipation. King Nathaniel stood as well, towering over me. His hand reached out, fingers gently tilting my chin upward until our eyes met fully. Something passed between us in that moment. A current of energy that made my skin prickle and my wolf stir restlessly within me. "I have made my choice," he announced, his voice carrying across the clearing. Relief washed through me. It was over. He would choose Olivia or Sophia, someone worthy, someone who actually wanted this position. And I would return to my quiet life in the shadows. I would be free to pursue my secret plan, to leave the pack territories entirely, to find a place where being an Omega didn't define my entire existence. The king's hand fell from my chin, but he didn't step away. Instead, he turned to address the gathered crowd, his voice resonant with authority. "The spirits of our ancestors have spoken. I have found my Luna." A ripple of excitement passed through the assembly. I took a step backward, preparing to blend into the crowd once more, to disappear as I had always done. "Clara Winters," King Nathaniel said, turning back to me with those penetrating amber eyes. "You will be my Luna." The world tilted beneath my feet. Murmurs of surprise swept through the gathering. Expressions of shock, confusion, and in some cases, outright disbelief. I stood frozen, certain I had misheard. "But I failed," I whispered, too stunned to maintain the proper protocol. "The wine. The dance." The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Did you?" he asked, his voice for my ears alone. "Or did you simply show me something far more interesting than perfection?" As the implications of his words sank in, I felt the blood drain from my face. The pendant at my throat seemed to grow heavier, my grandmother's words echoing in my mind. "Follow your heart, little one, even when the path seems impossible." But this path, the one I now found myself on, wasn't just impossible, it was terrifying. The celebration feast blurred around me in a cacophony of sounds and colors. Pack members approached with congratulations I didn't deserve, their words washing over me like waves I was too numb to feel. I smiled mechanically, my cheeks aching with the effort of maintaining the facade while my mind raced through increasingly desperate scenarios. "You must be overwhelmed," Elder Mara said, appearing beside me with a goblet of honeyed mead. Her weathered hand squeezed mine, a gesture of support that made guilt twist sharply in my chest. "It's not every day an Omega rises to such heights. I never expected this," I replied truthfully, accepting the drink with trembling fingers. "The goddess works in mysterious ways." Her eyes, milky with age but still piercing, studied my face. "Sometimes what we think we want isn't what we need," I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Across the great hall, King Nathaniel stood surrounded by his advisors, his powerful presence drawing eyes like a lodestone. Occasionally, his gaze would find mine through the crowd, that same unreadable expression making my heart stutter. "He knows," whispered a voice in my head. "He knows, and he's punishing you." When am I expected to move into the royal quarters?" I asked, the words nearly sticking in my throat. "Tomorrow at dawn," Elder Mara replied. "I will help you prepare your belongings tonight." My small cottage at the edge of Packlands flashed through my mind, the books carefully collected over years, the herbs hanging from the rafters, the small window overlooking the forest where I had planned my escape. All of it would be left behind now. "There is much you must learn before the bonding ceremony," she continued, oblivious to my inner turmoil. "The responsibilities of a Luna are vast, particularly for one who will stand beside King Nathaniel. He is not an easy man, but he is fair and devoted to our people." I nodded again, my gaze drifting to the massive windows that overlooked the darkened forest beyond. Somewhere out there was freedom, the human cities where wolf politics couldn't reach me, where I could be anonymous, undefined by my designation. A sudden hush fell over the gathering. I turned to find King Nathaniel approaching, the crowd parting before him like water. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Broad shoulders encased in formal black attire, his movements fluid and predatory despite the civilized setting. "Elder Mara." He inclined his head respectfully before turning those amber eyes to me. "Clara, I hope you're enjoying the celebration. Yes, Your Majesty, I lied, dropping my gaze to the floor. Nathaniel, he corrected quietly. When we're alone, you'll call me Nathaniel. The intimacy implied in those words sent a tremor through me. Elder Mara excused herself with a knowing smile, leaving me alone with the man who had just upended my entire existence. Walk with me, he said, extending his arm in a gesture that was more command than invitation. I placed my hand lightly on his forearm, intensely aware of the solid muscle beneath the fabric, of the heat that seemed to radiate from him. He led me through a side door onto a stone balcony overlooking the moonlit gardens. The night air was cool against my flushed skin, laden with the scent of night-blooming flowers. For several long moments, neither of us spoke. I stood rigid beside him, struggling to control my racing thoughts, to maintain the demure persona expected of an Omega in the presence of the Alpha King. You're afraid of me, he stated finally, his deep voice startling in the silence. No, you're Nathaniel, I corrected quickly. I'm just surprised by your choice. He turned to face me, studying me with that penetrating gaze that made me feel transparent. Are you? Truly? Something in his tone made me glance up. The moonlight carved shadows across his features, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the intensity of his expression. Everyone is, I said carefully. There were others far more qualified, more practiced at pretending, perhaps, he interrupted, his voice deceptively soft. More skilled at playing the role they think I want, but qualified. He shook his head. I've watched you for years, Clara Winters. My breath caught. What? A slight smile curved his mouth, transforming his severe features into something devastatingly handsome. Did you think I wouldn't notice the girl who vanishes whenever I enter a room? Who volunteers for border patrols during council meetings? Who spends hours in the library reading texts on human cities and customs? Each word was a blow, dismantling the careful illusion I had maintained for so long. I stepped back instinctively, but his hand caught mine, his touch gentle despite the strength I knew he possessed. Why did you enter the ceremony if you plan to fail it? He asked directly. Denial rose to my lips automatically, but died before I could voice it. What was the point of lying when he had clearly seen through me from the beginning? It was expected, I said finally, my voice barely audible. No eligible Omega has ever declined. It would have raised too many questions. Questions about why you've been stockpiling supplies in that hollow tree 2 miles past the eastern border? He raised an eyebrow when I flinched. Or perhaps questions about the human currency hidden beneath the floorboards of your cottage. Ice flooded my veins. How long have you known? Long enough. His thumb traced absent patterns on my wrist where he still held me, the gentle touch at odds with the devastating revelations. What I haven't determined is why. Why would an Omega with a respected position in the pack, with friends who care for her, choose to flee into a world that would offer her no protection? The genuine curiosity in his voice loosened something in my chest. Because out there, I wouldn't be just an Omega, I said, the truth spilling out despite years of careful concealment. I'd be Clara, just Clara, not someone to be protected or pitied or claimed. His expression darkened at my last word, his fingers tightening slightly around mine. Is that what you think being Luna means? Being claimed like property? Isn't it? I challenged, surprising myself with my boldness. I would exist to support you, to bear your children, to be the soft face of your rule. My grandmother was an Omega too, and your grandmother refused 3 alpha suitors before accepting your grandfather, he interrupted. She served on the council for 40 years and was instrumental in negotiating peace with the northern packs. I know this because she made quite sure I understood the strength that runs in your bloodline before she died. I stared at him, stunned. You knew my grandmother? She was a formidable woman. Something like respect colored his tone. She spoke of you often, though she never pushed for this match. She believed connections should form naturally, or not at all. My free hand rose to touch the pendant hidden beneath my dress, my grandmother's last gift to me. Had she known somehow? Had this been her hope all along? I don't understand, I said finally. If you knew I was planning to leave, why choose me? Why not simply stop me? Because forcing you to stay would prove everything you believe about being an Omega in our world, he replied, his gaze never leaving mine. And because a Luna who comes to her position through coercion is no true partner, then what do you want from me? I whispered. His hand released mine, moving instead to gently brush a strand of pale hair from my face. The casual intimacy of the gesture sent warmth spiraling through me despite my confusion. 6 months, he said. Stay as my Luna for 6 months. Learn what the position truly entails. Meet with the council. Work alongside me. See the difference you could make. His voice lowered, becoming almost hypnotic in its intensity. If, after that time, you still wish to leave, I will personally escort you to the border with supplies and protection. I searched his face for deception and found none, only a steady resolve that both intimidated and fascinated me. And if I refuse, then you leave tonight, he said simply. No one will stop you. Your absence will be explained as a personal matter, and another will be chosen as Luna. The choice hung between us, impossibly weighted. Leave now, alone and unprepared, or stay for 6 months in a position I had deliberately avoided, beside a man whose very presence made it difficult to think clearly. Why me? I asked, needing to understand. With everything you know about my reluctance, my plans to leave, why would you still want me as Luna? Something shifted in his expression then, a vulnerability I wouldn't have believed possible in the Alpha King. Because when I scented you tonight, my wolf recognized something my human side has suspected for years. His voice dropped lower, the words seeming to resonate in my very bones. You challenge me, Clara. You question. You observe. You think for yourself in a world that has tried to convince you that your only value lies in submission. He stepped closer, his scent enveloping me, that intoxicating mixture of pine and smoke and power. Our pack doesn't need another decorative Luna who agrees with everything I say. It needs someone who sees things differently, who understands both strength and compassion. My heart thundered in my chest, my wolf stirring restlessly beneath my skin, drawn to him despite my fears. 6 months seemed both an eternity and a heartbeat. Do we have an agreement? He asked, his expression unreadable once more. I took a deep breath, my grandmother's words echoing in my mind. Follow your heart, little one, even when the path seems impossible. 6 months, I agreed finally. And then I decide. Something like triumph flashed in his amber eyes, quickly masked. He extended his hand to seal our bargain, and as my fingers met his, a current of awareness raced up my arm. This was no ordinary agreement. This was the beginning of something that would change everything. Dawn arrived with soft golden light filtering through unfamiliar curtains. I blinked awake, momentarily disoriented by the luxurious bedchamber that surrounded me, a far cry from my modest cottage. The events of the previous night crashed back into my consciousness. The ceremony, the king's unexpected choice, our moonlit bargain. 6 months. I had agreed to 6 months. My new quarters in the east wing of the pack house were spacious and elegant, with tall windows overlooking the mountains beyond our territory. Elder Mara had arrived at my cottage before sunrise, helping me pack the few personal belongings I'd wanted to bring. My grandmother's journals, a cherished collection of poetry, the herbs I had carefully cultivated. The rest had been left behind, a strange preview of the abandonment I still planned once my agreement with King Nathaniel, was fulfilled. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Before I could respond, the door opened to reveal a young woman with copper hair and a friendly smile. "Good morning, Luna," she said, dipping into a respectful curtsy. "I'm Evelyn, assigned to assist you with your daily needs." "Please don't curtsy," I said, pushing back the plush covers. "And Clara is fine." Evelyn's smile faltered slightly. "The king instructed me to treat you with all the respect your position commands, Luna." She moved efficiently around the room, opening curtains wider to admit more light. "Your schedule today includes breakfast with His Majesty, followed by a tour of your new responsibilities, and then lunch with the Elder Council." My stomach tightened with anxiety. "That sounds extensive." "Being Luna is no small task," she replied, opening a massive wardrobe filled with clothing I didn't recognize. "These arrived this morning, The king had them commissioned weeks ago, though they were only delivered after your selection was announced. I ran my fingers over fine fabrics in shades of blue, green, and silver, colors that would complement my pale coloring. Weeks ago? But how could he have known? Evelyn's expression grew guarded. It's not my place to speculate on His Majesty's decisions, Luna. But the implication was clear. Nathaniel had been planning this long before the ceremony. The realization sent a shiver down my spine. Had my fate been decided all along? My careful plans nothing but an illusion of choice. With Evelyn's help, I dressed in a simple but elegant day dress of pale blue, its flowing design simultaneously regal and comfortable. She arranged my light blonde hair in a style that was both sophisticated and natural, securing it with silver pins. "You look beautiful, Luna," she said, genuine warmth in her voice. "The king will be pleased." I swallowed hard, uncertain how to respond to the idea that my appearance should please anyone but myself. This was precisely the kind of thinking I had hoped to escape. "Thank you for your help, Evelyn," I said instead, smoothing invisible wrinkles from my dress. I suppose I shouldn't keep him waiting. The main dining hall was mercifully empty of pack members when I arrived, though several servants moved quietly around the massive table, setting out platters of food. Nathaniel stood by the windows, his powerful frame silhouetted against the morning light. He turned as I entered, his amber eyes sweeping over me in a way that made heat rise to my cheeks. "Good morning, Clara," he said, his deep voice sending an involuntary shiver through me. "I trust you slept well?" "Well enough, considering the circumstances," I replied honestly, approaching the table but maintaining a careful distance between us. A slight smile curved his mouth. "Diplomatic. That's a useful quality in a Luna." "I'm not actually Luna yet," I reminded him, my voice quiet but firm, "not until the bonding ceremony." "A technicality," he said, pulling out a chair for me. "The pack already recognizes you as mine." That possessive word, mine, sparked a flare of defiance. Part of our agreement was that I would learn what being Luna truly entails. That suggests there's more to it than simply being yours. His expression sharpened with interest, as though my challenge pleased rather than offended him. "Indeed there is, which is why today's schedule is rather full." We ate in relative silence, though I felt his gaze on me frequently. The food was exquisite: fresh berries, warm bread with honey, perfectly cooked eggs, but anxiety robbed me of appetite. "You're worried about meeting the Elder Council," he observed, his perception uncanny. I set down my fork. "They'll see through me immediately. They'll know I'm not qualified. They'll see what I see," he interrupted. "Someone intelligent, observant, and unafraid to speak her mind when necessary." "Is that truly what you see?" I asked, genuinely curious despite myself. Nathaniel leaned forward slightly, his gaze intensifying. "I see a woman who stockpiled supplies for months, who studied human customs in secret, who planned to leave everything familiar to forge her own path. That requires courage and determination, qualities our pack needs in its Luna. Put that way, my planned escape sounded almost admirable rather than cowardly." Before I could respond, the doors opened to admit a tall, serious-looking man. "Your Majesty, Luna." He acknowledged us both with a respectful nod. "The Border Patrol reports are ready for your review." "Thank you, Marcus," Nathaniel replied. "Clara, this is Marcus Hayes, my beta and chief of security. He'll be accompanying us today." Marcus's dark eyes assessed me with professional detachment. I recognized him from around the Packlands, but had never spoken with him directly. Another powerful figure I had carefully avoided. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you properly, Luna," he said, his tone formal but not unfriendly. "Just Clara, please," I responded automatically. "Protocol dictates," Marcus began, but Nathaniel raised a hand, silencing him. "Clara is still adjusting to her new position," the king said. "Some flexibility with formalities might be appropriate for now." The look that passed between the two men suggested a long history and deep trust. I found myself wondering how many of my secrets Marcus knew, how much Nathaniel had shared with his most trusted advisor. The morning passed in a whirlwind of introductions and information. Nathaniel guided me through the pack house, explaining the functions of various departments: security, health services, education, foreign relations. At each stop, pack members bowed respectfully, their curious gazes following me when they thought I wouldn't notice. The Luna's primary domain has traditionally been pack welfare, Nathaniel explained as we walked between buildings, ensuring that the needs of every pack member are met, particularly those who might otherwise be overlooked. The vulnerable, I murmured, thinking of my own experiences as an orphaned Omega. Precisely. His hand rested briefly at the small of my back as he guided me around a corner. Your predecessor focused primarily on pup education and healthcare. I glanced up at him, curious despite myself. I've never heard much about the former Luna. She passed before I was born, didn't she? Something flickered across his face, an old pain, quickly masked. My mother died when I was 12. She was much beloved by the pack. The personal revelation surprised me. I'm sorry. It must have been difficult to lose her so young. It was, he acknowledged, his tone suggesting the subject was closed. We continued to the pack's healing center, a modern facility that combined traditional werewolf healing practices with human medical technology. The head healer, Dr. Sophie Bennett, greeted me with genuine warmth. Luna Clara, she said, taking my hands in hers. I've been hoping you might take an interest in our work here. Your knowledge of medicinal herbs is quite remarkable. I blinked in surprise. You know about my herb garden, the fever that swept through the younger pups last winter? Dr. Bennett smiled. Your elderberry and echinacea tinctures were more effective than anything we had on hand. I've been meaning to consult with you about expanding our herbal medicine program. Nathaniel watched this exchange with evident satisfaction. It seems you've already been contributing to pack welfare, even from the shadows. The realization was unsettling. All this time I had believed myself invisible, unimportant to pack function, yet here was evidence that my quiet efforts had been noticed and valued. By midday, my head was spinning with information and new faces. Nathaniel led me to a smaller dining room where the elder council awaited. 5 elderly wolves rose as we entered, their expressions varying from open curiosity to thinly veiled skepticism. Elders, Nathaniel acknowledged them with respect. I present Clara Winters, your Luna-elect. Elder Mara smiled encouragingly, but the others studied me with measuring gazes. An unexpected choice, remarked Elder Thomas, a gray-haired man with shrewd eyes. Though perhaps not unwelcome. Your grandmother served this council with distinction, young Clara. I'm aware I have much to prove, I said quietly, meeting his gaze directly. And much to learn. Humility, nodded Elder Fiona approvingly. A quality sometimes lacking in youth. The lunch proceeded with careful questions about my background, my interests, my thoughts on pack matters. I answered honestly, but guardedly, conscious of Nathaniel's presence beside me, of the weight of expectations settling around my shoulders like a cloak I wasn't certain I wished to wear. When talk turned to the upcoming bonding ceremony, scheduled for the next full moon, my anxiety returned full force. The traditional preparation period is 3 weeks, Elder Thomas was saying. Though given the circumstances, perhaps a longer engagement would be appropriate. The date stands, Nathaniel replied, his tone brooking no argument. Clara and I have an understanding. The elders exchanged glances, clearly curious but too respectful to question their alpha directly. I felt a flare of resentment at how easily he referenced our private arrangement, as though my agreement was a foregone conclusion rather than a temporary compromise. As the meeting concluded, Elder Mara drew me aside while Nathaniel conversed with the others. You seem troubled, child, she said, her perceptive gaze searching my face. It's overwhelming, I admitted. Yesterday I was just Clara. Today everyone looks at me differently, expects things from me. Her weathered hand covered mine. They look at you and see possibility. As for expectations, her eyes twinkled with unexpected mischief. Expectations can be managed, even changed. Your grandmother understood this well. You knew her relationship with my grandfather wasn't traditional, didn't you? I asked, remembering Nathaniel's revelations. Serena was never one to be bound by tradition, Elder Mara confirmed. Neither was King Nathaniel's mother, for that matter. Strong women have a way of reshaping roles to suit themselves, rather than being reshaped by them. Before I could ask more, Nathaniel appeared at my side. "We should continue our tour," he said. "The pack lands beyond the main compound await." As we stepped outside into the afternoon sunlight, I found myself studying him with new eyes. What kind of alpha willingly chose a Luna who had planned to flee? What kind of man offered freedom as an inducement to stay? And more disturbing still, what would happen when my 6 months were finished, and I had to choose between the freedom I had always craved and the connections I was reluctantly beginning to form? 3 weeks passed in a blur of new routines and responsibilities. Each morning I woke expecting to feel suffocated by the constraints of pack life, by the constant attention my new position attracted. Instead, I found myself increasingly drawn into the complex web of relationships and duties that made up the pack's daily functioning. The most unexpected development was my work at the healing center. What had begun as occasional consultations with Dr. Bennett about herbal remedies had evolved into a dedicated program. 3 afternoons a week, I taught younger pack members about identifying and preparing medicinal plants, knowledge passed down from my grandmother that I had once considered useless in the human world I had planned to enter. "You have a gift for teaching," Nathaniel observed one evening as we shared dinner in his private quarters, a routine that had developed naturally over the weeks. "Sophie says the younger healers hang on your every word." "They're eager to learn," I replied, still uncomfortable with praise, "and it gives them options beyond traditional treatments." He watched me over the rim of his wineglass, those amber eyes perpetually observant. "Is that what you wanted? Options?" The question struck closer to the heart of my escape plan than I was prepared to discuss. "Everyone wants choices," I said carefully, "and yet you've made none regarding the bonding ceremony." His tone was neutral, but I detected an undercurrent of tension. "It's less than a week away." I set down my fork, appetite vanishing. The ceremony, the formal ritual that would bind me to Nathaniel and the pack permanently, loomed over me like a storm cloud on the horizon. Elder Mara had approached me multiple times about preparations, only to be met with vague responses and delays. "Our agreement was 6 months," I reminded him, my voice quiet but firm. "The ceremony would make that irreversible." Something flickered across his face. Disappointment, perhaps, or frustration. "The pack expects it. Questions are already being raised about the delay." "So this is about appearances?" I challenged, a spark of the old defiance flaring within me. "This is about stability," he countered, leaning forward slightly. "About the message we send to our people and neighboring packs. A Luna-elect who refuses the bonding ceremony suggests fundamental problems within the leadership. Or perhaps it suggests a Luna who isn't ready to surrender her autonomy," I said, meeting his gaze directly. Nathaniel's expression softened unexpectedly. "Is that what you believe the bond would do? Take your freedom? Wouldn't it?" The question emerged more vulnerable than I had intended. He rose from his chair and circled the table, coming to kneel beside me in a gesture that shocked me with its humility. The Alpha King, on his knees before an Omega. "The mate bond enhances what already exists between two wolves," he said, his deep voice resonant with conviction. "It doesn't erase individuality. It creates a bridge of understanding while preserving the essence of each." His proximity was distracting, his scent surrounding me, that intoxicating blend of pine and smoke that had begun to feel like home in ways I wasn't prepared to examine. "Your mother and father shared such a bond," he continued. "As did your grandmother and grandfather. Did either of those women strike you as diminished by their connections?" The question struck me speechless. My memories of my parents were fragmented by time and grief, but one image remained crystal clear. My mother standing fierce and proud beside my father as they prepared to defend our borders, equals in determination and courage, and my grandmother, strong-willed and independent until her final days. "No," I admitted softly. "They didn't." His hand covered mine, warm and surprisingly gentle for someone with such power. "I'm not asking you to decide about leaving or staying. That choice remains yours at the end of our agreed time. I'm asking only that you consider the ceremony as a step in understanding what being Luna truly means, what being my mate could mean, before you make your final decision." The sincerity in his voice was impossible to doubt. In 3 weeks, I had seen Nathaniel mediate pack disputes with unwavering fairness, had watched him spend hours with the youngest pups teaching them control over their wolf forms, had observed his patient mentoring of young alphas struggling with their strength. The ruthless, domineering alpha I had feared seemed a shadow compared to the complex reality of the man. "I need time," I whispered. "Time you have," he assured me, rising to his feet once more. "But not endless amounts. The moon waits for no one, Luna." The formal title, still foreign to my ears despite weeks of hearing it from others, sounded different from his lips, less a designation of rank and more a term of affection. The thought disturbed me enough that I excused myself early, retreating to my quarters where I paced restlessly before the windows overlooking the moonlit forest. Somewhere beyond those trees lay the human world I had once been so determined to enter. It still called to me, that promise of anonymity and self-determination. But the call had grown fainter with each passing day. A soft knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Expecting Evelyn, I called for them to enter, only to find Elder Mara standing in the doorway, a wooden box cradled in her arms. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said, her weathered face kind in the soft lamplight. "But there's something you should see before you make your decision about the ceremony." "How did you know I was—" I began, then stopped. Of course the elder would be aware of my hesitation, of the silent tension building as the full moon approached. She smiled, setting the box on a small table. "I've lived long enough to recognize the signs of a soul in conflict. Your grandmother wore the same expression many times." The mention of my grandmother drew me closer. "What is this?" "Serena left this in my keeping before her passing," Elder Mara explained, opening the box to reveal a collection of leather-bound journals and what appeared to be letters. "She asked that I give them to you when the time was right. I believe that time is now." With reverent hands, I lifted the topmost journal, its pages yellowed with age, filled with my grandmother's elegant script. The first entry was dated more than 50 years earlier. "Today I met the alpha who believes he will make me his Luna. He is like all the others, convinced of his own importance, blind to anything beyond his own desires. I refused him, of course. The elders are furious, but I cannot bind myself to someone who sees me as a possession, rather than a partner." I looked up at Elder Mara, startled by the candid words so at odds with the traditional narrative of an Omega's grateful submission. "Keep reading," she encouraged gently. "There's much more." I turned pages rapidly, skimming through entries that documented my grandmother's rejections of 2 more suitors, her unconventional courtship with my grandfather, her struggles to be taken seriously on the council. Her voice, strong, determined, occasionally bitingly funny, leapt from the pages, so familiar it made my chest ache with sudden grief and longing. Then I reached entries from after my parents' deaths, when she had taken me in. Clara shows the same spark I once had, the determination to define herself beyond what others expect. I see how she watches the human teachers who visit our school, how she collects maps and books about places beyond our territory. Part of me fears she will leave us someday, seeking what I once sought. Another part recognizes her right to choose her own path, even if it leads away from all I hold dear. The young prince watches her too, though she doesn't notice. There's something in his gaze that reminds me of how Samuel looked at me all those years ago, not possessive, but curious, respectful of the mystery another soul represents. Perhaps. The entry ended there, unfinished. I looked up to find Elder Mara watching me with gentle understanding. "She knew," I whispered. "She saw something between Nathaniel and me before I even spoke to him." "Serena saw many things," the elder agreed, "including the struggle that awaited you. The same she once faced between freedom and belonging." "What did she choose?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. My grandmother had remained with the pack, had served on the council, had raised me after my parents died. "She chose both," Elder Mara said simply. "She redefined what belonging meant, created a freedom within bonds rather than without them. That was her gift, and perhaps it is yours as well." She rose to leave, patting my hand gently. "The journals are yours now. Perhaps they'll help you see your path more clearly." Long after she left, I sat reading by lamplight, absorbing my grandmother's journey. Her fears, her triumphs, her hard-won wisdom. Dawn was breaking when I finally set aside the last journal, my mind whirling with new perspectives and possibilities. I dressed quickly and made my way through the quiet pack house to the training grounds where I knew Nathaniel would be beginning his daily exercises. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of approaching autumn as I found him moving through complex fighting forms with fluid grace. He sensed my presence immediately, turning to face me with surprise evident in his expression. "Clara? Is something wrong?" "I've made my decision," I said, my voice steady despite the thundering of my heart. "I'll participate in the bonding ceremony." Joy flashed across his features before caution tempered it. "May I ask what changed your mind?" "My grandmother's journals," I replied honestly. She faced choices similar to mine, and found a way to be true to herself while remaining connected to the pack, to those she loved. The word loved hung between us, unexpectedly significant. Nathaniel approached slowly, as though afraid I might startle and flee like the deer I sometimes resembled. "This doesn't change our agreement," I added quickly. "After 6 months, the choice will still be yours," he finished for me. I gave my word. He stood before me now, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes. Without the barrier of my resistance between us, something new and dangerous unfurled in my chest, a longing I had refused to acknowledge. "There's something else," I said, gathering my courage. "If we're to be bonded, even temporarily, there's something I need to know. Anything," he promised, his gaze never leaving mine. "Why me?" I asked, the question that had haunted me since the ceremony, not the diplomatic answer about needing someone who challenges you. The truth. For the first time since I'd known him, Nathaniel seemed momentarily at a loss for words. When he finally spoke, his voice held a vulnerability I'd never heard before. "Because from the first moment I saw you, a quiet girl with serious eyes who slipped away from celebrations to read beneath the old oak tree, something in me recognized something in you." His hand rose to gently touch my cheek. "Because despite all your plans to leave, your heart has always been here, in the herbs you grow for the sick, the stories you tell the pups, the way you notice those others overlook." His thumb traced the curve of my cheekbone, sending shivers cascading through me. "Because you're the only one I've ever wanted, Clara. The only one I ever will." The simple truth in his words broke something open inside me, a door I had kept firmly closed against possibility, against connection, against the very thing I now faced. The terrifying realization that in trying to protect my freedom, I might have fled from the greatest freedom of all. The freedom to belong, to be known, to be cherished exactly as I was. "The ceremony is in 3 days," I said softly. "We have much to prepare." His smile, genuine, unguarded, transformed his face from handsome to breathtaking. "Indeed we do, Luna. This time, the title felt less like a burden and more like a promise, one I was finally ready to explore. The night of the bonding ceremony arrived beneath a sky crowded with stars and dominated by the full moon that hung low and luminous over the sacred clearing. The same location where I had deliberately failed the Luna ceremony now stood transformed with hundreds of flickering lanterns suspended from tree branches, casting golden light over the gathered pack members. I waited in a small tent at the edge of the clearing, my heart thundering as Evelyn and Elder Mara made final adjustments to my appearance. My ceremonial dress was a creation of flowing silver silk that caught the light with every movement, embroidered with symbols of pack history and tradition. My pale blonde hair had been partially braided with tiny white flowers, the rest falling in loose waves down my back. "You look radiant, child," Elder Mara said, her eyes suspiciously bright in the lantern light. "Serena would be so proud." I touched my grandmother's pendant, now prominently displayed against the silver of my dress rather than hidden. "I wish she could be here. In many ways she is," the elder replied, squeezing my hand. "Her strength lives in you." A sudden hush fell over the gathered pack, signaling Nathaniel's arrival at the ceremonial circle. My time for preparation was over. "Remember," Elder Mara said as she prepared to lead me out, "the bonding is a choice made with each heartbeat. Not just in this moment, but in all the moments that follow. The ritual begins the journey, your hearts determine its course." Stepping from the tent into the moonlight, I felt hundreds of eyes turn toward me. The path to the center of the clearing was lined with pack members, their expressions ranging from joy to curiosity to, in the case of some of the other Omega candidates from the original ceremony, barely concealed envy. At the center of it all stood Nathaniel, resplendent in ceremonial clothing of deep blue, adorned with silver that matched my own. But it was his expression that caught and held my attention, the naked wonder and admiration in his gaze as he watched my approach, as though I were something precious beyond measure. 3 weeks ago, such open desire would have frightened me, sent me retreating further into my shell of self-protection. Now, after countless hours of conversation, after witnessing his leadership and compassion, after reading my grandmother's insights and confronting my own fears, I found myself moving toward him with steady steps, drawn by a pull I no longer wished to resist. Elder Mara guided me to stand before him in the center of the circle. Nathaniel extended his hands, and I placed mine in his without hesitation, our fingers intertwining naturally. Tonight, Elder Mara announced to the gathered pack, we witness the bonding of Alpha and Omega, of strength and compassion, of protection and nurturing. Tonight, 2 souls choose to walk a shared path while retaining their individual journeys. The traditional words washed over me, but it was Nathaniel's gaze that held my attention. Intense, focused entirely on me, as though the rest of the world had fallen away. Nathaniel Blackthorn, Elder Mara continued, do you choose this woman as your mate, your equal in all things, promising to value her wisdom, respect her strength, and honor her freedom within your bond? I do so choose, he replied, his deep voice resonant with certainty. From this night until my final breath. Clara Winters, the elder turned to me. Do you choose this man as your mate, your partner in all things, promising to share your wisdom, lend your strength, and honor his heart within your bond? For a heartbeat, I was transported back to the Luna ceremony, to my deliberate failure, my plans for escape, my certainty that submission was the only future available to me as an Omega. How wrong I had been. I do so choose, I said clearly, my voice carrying across the hushed clearing. From this night forward, for as long as our paths are meant to join. A subtle variation on the traditional response, acknowledging both my commitment and the agreement that still stood between us. Nathaniel's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around mine, but his expression remained steady. Elder Mara produced a ceremonial goblet filled with a mixture of wine and herbs. Drink now of the cup of joining, that your spirits may recognize one another across any distance, any challenge, any trial. Nathaniel drank first, his eyes never leaving mine as he passed the goblet to me. I took it with steady hands, sipping the sweet, complex liquid that warmed me from within. As I lowered the cup, the clearing seemed to shift and shimmer around us, the bond beginning to form between our spirits. Now comes the marking, Elder Mara announced, the physical manifestation of the spiritual bond. This was the moment I had both anticipated and feared, the bite that would leave Nathaniel's mark upon me, visible proof of our connection. In the old days, only the Alpha would mark the Omega, a sign of possession more than partnership. But traditions had evolved, even if many packs still clung to outdated hierarchies. Nathaniel stepped closer, his hands moving to cradle my face with unexpected tenderness. I offer my mark as a gift, not a claim, he said softly, the words meant for my ears alone. You may accept or refuse, with no judgment either way. The respect inherent in that choice, the acknowledgement of my autonomy even in this most traditional of moments, cemented something in my heart that had been slowly taking root over the past weeks. I accept, I whispered, tilting my head to expose the curve where my neck met my shoulder. And I offer the same in return. Surprise and joy flashed across his features at my unexpected reciprocation. The traditional exchange of marks was rare now, reserved for pairs who truly considered themselves equals regardless of designation. His lips brushed my skin first, a gentle caress that sent shivers through my entire body. Then came the sharp, brief pain of his teeth, quickly replaced by a flood of sensation that transcended the physical. Colors intensified, scents sharpened, and most overwhelming of all, I could suddenly feel him, not just physically but emotionally. A new awareness of his presence in my mind, like the gentle pressure of a hand against my own. Before I could fully process the sensation, it was my turn. I rose on tiptoes as he bent his head, offering the same vulnerable spot on his powerful frame. The taste of his skin was intoxicating, wild and clean like forest air after a storm. My teeth broke the surface, and the connection between us flared bright and overwhelming. Joy. That was the first emotion I felt flowing through our new bond, pure, unrestrained joy from him, matched by my own astonishment and wonder. There was no domination, no smothering of my sense of self, only a bridge between us that allowed emotions to flow freely in both directions. "I told you it wouldn't diminish you," his voice whispered in my mind. Another aspect of the bond I hadn't anticipated. "So you did," I responded silently, amazed at the ease of this new communication. Around us, the pack erupted in cheers and howls of celebration. The ritual complete, the bond established. The traditional feast would follow, lasting until dawn. But first came the ceremonial run. Alpha and Luna leading the pack through moonlit territory in wolf form, symbolizing their protection and guidance. We moved away from the circle hand in hand, retreating to separate tents at the edge of the clearing to shift forms. The transformation came easily tonight, my wolf eager to emerge, to run alongside her mate for the first time. My clothes fell away as fur rippled across my skin, bones and muscles rearranging themselves in the familiar dance of change. When I emerged, a sleek wolf with pale golden fur, Nathaniel was waiting, massive and dark against the night, his amber eyes the same in this form as his human one. Around us, other pack members were shifting as well, preparing to follow our lead into the forest. Nathaniel's wolf approached mine, circling once before pressing his muzzle gently against my neck where his mark now resided. The gesture was both possessive and reverent, a silent acknowledgement of our new connection. Then he threw back his head and howled, a sound of triumph and joy that echoed through the clearing and beyond. I joined my voice to his, our howls twining together in perfect harmony, before we turned as one and sprinted toward the tree line. The pack followed, a river of fur and muscle flowing through the moonlit forest. But my awareness was centered entirely on the powerful wolf running beside me. Freedom. That was what I felt as we ran, not the isolated independence I had once craved, but something richer and more complex. Freedom within connection, strength within vulnerability, safety within risk. The contradictions made perfect sense now, illuminated by the bond that hummed between us like a living thing. We ran for hours, exploring the furthest reaches of pack territory, places I had never seen despite my years here. Nathaniel showed me secret valleys and hidden waterfalls, ancient trees and stars reflected in still pools. Through it all, our bond deepened and settled, no longer overwhelming, but a steady, comforting presence, like a hand held in darkness. Dawn was approaching when we finally returned to the clearing, shifting back to human form to join the feast that continued in our absence. Exhausted but exhilarated, we accepted the congratulations of pack members, shared food and drink, participated in traditional dances that celebrated new beginnings. As the first light of morning touched the eastern horizon, Nathaniel led me away from the festivities toward a path I didn't recognize. It wound through the forest before emerging at a small, perfect cottage beside a stream, more elegant than my former home but carrying the same sense of privacy and peace. "What is this place?" I asked, taking in the herb garden already planted along one side, the shelves visible through windows that would hold my books and journals. "A wedding gift," Nathaniel replied, watching my reaction carefully. "Your own space within the larger packlands, a compromise between the royal quarters and the independence you value." I turned to him, astonished by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "You built this for me not knowing if I would stay beyond our agreement. I built it hoping you would choose to stay, but respecting that you might not." He brushed a strand of hair from my face, his touch sending sparks through our new bond. "The next 4 months are still yours to decide, Clara. The bond doesn't change that. And if I chose to leave?" I asked, needing to know, despite the increasing unlikelihood of that choice, the bond would remain, a connection across distance rather than a chain. He said quietly, "I meant what I promised you. Your freedom remains your own." I studied him in the growing light, this powerful man who had upended all my expectations, who had seen through my failures at the Luna ceremony to the frightened heart beneath, who offered leadership through partnership rather than dominance. And what if I were to choose to stay? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Not as an obligation, not from fear, but because I found something I wasn't looking for. Hope flared through our bond, bright and fierce, though his expression remained carefully neutral. Then we would build something new together, a relationship defined by us, not by outdated traditions about what alphas and omegas should be. I stepped closer, drawn by the sincerity in his words, by the emotions flowing freely between us now. My hand rose to touch the mark on his neck. My mark, my claim as much as his was on me. I think, I said slowly, that my grandmother would approve of that approach. His arms encircled me, drawing me against the solid warmth of his chest. Through our bond, I felt his happiness, his relief, his cautious optimism. 6 months, he reminded me. Ever honorable even when it might cost him what he desired most. You still have time to... I silenced him with a kiss, our first, surprisingly gentle despite the passion simmering beneath. Against his lips, I whispered words I never thought I'd say. I failed the Luna ceremony on purpose because I feared losing myself. I'm staying of my own free will because I've finally found who I truly am, and who we might be together. As the sun rose fully above the horizon, casting golden light across our intertwined figures, I realized that sometimes the most profound freedom comes not from escaping bonds, but from choosing the right ones.